I don't want to waste your time, so there will be no intro. Unless you've lived under a rock, you probably will heard about the Nintendo patents that's actually been passed through by the patent office in America. There's quite a lot of controversy going around this whole topic in the sense that it was even passed. Now, part of the biggest problem is that it's a bit too broad and certain things shouldn't have been passed in the patent. But to be honest, this patent changes nothing. This shouldn't deter people from actually making their games and, pursuing the IPs that they're trying to develop. And there are a couple of factors that we'll probably talk about during this entire video. Let's get right in. Now, part of the problems with what they're actually talking about in the patent is that it basically involves basic mechanics of Power World. Games are very similar to Power World, where you have a sub-character or a summon. You summon the character is on the field, the character walks with you, and when you attack, you can initiate a battle with an opponent. Now, the biggest issue with this patent is that it's a bit too broad. A lot of games actually do this currently. You can even see games like Genshin Impact. Yeah, it's not part of the core mechanic, but characters like Farina, for example, that has like the summons when she's roaming in the open world, it basically describes aspects of the claims on this patent. But the reason why game companies shouldn't really fear as much as they should, as it's been portrayed here, is that these patents normally are just the deterrents in general, right? Unless Nintendo has strong claims to back up that this patent is not prior art, they can't really do anything against company. So the thing is that, why did Power World pussy out? Why did they decide to change the game direction? Why did they remove the Pokeball in the game? You'll find out by the end of this video. Now, there's something that we need to talk about when it comes to patents, right? And it's called prior art. Prior art basically depicts that, okay, this concept that you want to patent has already been done in the past. Now, if it has already been done in the past, the patent office will usually never let it slide. But this case is a very peculiar exception because, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, the patent office really dropped the ball on this one. But one thing I would like to mention over here is that there are two things that govern prior art, right? But before I can get to that, there are four parts of a patent: the background and the summary, which explains the patent; the detailed drawing descriptions, which you will see in the patent. These are the drawings, the detailed explanations of the patent, and the claims. Now, the most important parts of a patent really are the background and summary and the claims, right? Because the company needs to claim that they have done this first before it can be pursued in the court of law. But the issue here is that some of these claims, again, are very bold, but again, they can still fall under prior art. Why? Because first things first is the claim has to basically encompass a full prior art. And what I mean by that is that the prior art must describe all the claims elements. Right. So basically, a storage medium according to claim 1, wherein the game program further causes the processor to start the automatic control after the battle by the second mode ends. Right. So with what we described in the Power World element, initiating a battle and, exiting the battle and taking back your summon, that's all part of the claims. We're going to go through the claims one by one during this video. But before that, I'm just trying to explain the concept of prior art. Now, the second thing that I would want to tell you is that, is the claim rendered obvious, right? Is this something that's easily implementable by anybody in the space? And to be honest, most of these claims in this patent are very obvious and they shouldn't have been allowed. But the thing is that most of these claims cannot be pursued, because even if Nintendo decides to start fighting companies that do this, like for example, there are upcoming games like Azure Premilia is coming out. Power World was already released. This is nothing new. Final Fantasy games have done this in the past. Even Pokemon themselves, Digimon games have done this in the past. Even Pokemon themselves, right? They've done this in the past. So a lot of these aspects have been done, and if they're going to fight in courts, they are going to have to fight against companies that are trying to imitate them one for one. This is probably targeted more at Power World because, yeah, I mean, it kind of looks similar. Some of the Pokemons look quite similar to one another, and also they have Pokeballs in Power World, at least the old Power World. They've changed the game ever since then. Now, the thing about broad claims, so let's divide the claims section into two. They're independent claims and they're dependent claims. The independent claims in this place are quite broad, right? For example, it talks about a game program stored in a medium, the player character moves in virtual space, the player character has a sub-character that moves through an input, it can move automatically, it can follow the character basically this the typical stuff that you know in every game like Power World, Azure everything. But the reason they make these claims are the sole purpose they make these claims are to deter small companies. And why is it quite effective? Because if a small company sees that, oh, they've made a patent on this, it's not worth carrying on the project in most cases, depending on where the project is, right? So let's say a small company makes this and they get sued, that's the end of the company. They cannot even fight this at all, right? But Nintendo is not going to pursue try and sue a small company. It's usually just as a deterrent. There's no benefit for Nintendo to sue a small company that's not making much profit, right? Yes, they sue a small company that's not making much profit, so what? They end up losing by spending more money fighting in the court, right? But the reasons that Nintendo will specifically sue companies, and this is why big companies usually have a lot of patents, is because they bank on a lot of claims to be infringed so that they can sue a company, right? Technically, you only need one claim to sue someone, right? But if you have multiple claims and you see a particular game infringing on multiple claims, then they have more chances of winning. But for this patent in particular, this patent holds nothing really. I don't think that they should be able to win in the court with this garbage. But yeah, now let's talk about the dependent claims. Now, the dependent claims are just basically claims that usually quite specific. So the thing about novelty in particular is that you can describe it as if you have multiple small combination of things done together in a different way, it can still be considered novel. So let me give you an example, right? Let's say a coffee, right? You know those coffee cups that you take, like when you're ordering Starbucks, you can make a hole in the middle and then you can say, oh, this hole makes me smell the aroma of the coffee. But it can still be considered novel because it's still different technically, even though all you did is a hole. It really depends, and it's really like it's not like there's no specific answer to is it dangerous or is it not dangerous, is it something we should worry about or is it not something we should worry about. But technically I think this might possibly be a good thing for the industry, because people have to innovate and think of different ways to make their games. They can't just do the same thing other games do. For example, look at Genshin Impact. How many Genshin Impact clones do we have? How many Battle Royale clones do we have? It's the same thing over and over again. So it may potentially be a good thing, but the part that I fear the most is that if, for example, there's an optimal way to handle logic in a game, for example, like the AI elements of a sub-character, for example. Let's say if you're trying to circumvent the patent, you're going to want to offload the processing of that sub-character to not be local, but to be in the server, right? Now, are there advantages to this? There are definitely advantages to this. You probably will lower your own system requirements for your own user base, but that means you also have to have more robust servers to actually run it for each and every person that may play the game. But the most important thing that we need to highlight here really is that game companies can also circumvent the patents in many ways, right? Again, you need a combination of things to be novel. Even though technically one claim is enough to get somebody sued, most of the times a company like Nintendo, based on this patent, would normally lose in the court of law. Now, let's talk about each individual claim, right? Everything is first based on Claim 1. So we can start by reading Claim 1. Claim 1 is quite long. A non-transitional computer-readable storage medium that's having stored in a game program. The game program causing the processor of an information processing apparatus to execute, performing, control, or moving a player character on a field virtual based on the environment. When an enemy character is placed at a location, it explains the whole concept of when you're moving with your sub-character in space and attacking. So let's start with the broad claims, because this is a very broad claim. This could be anything, and it's still not specific, and it doesn't mean that it's very defendable. What could happen here is that, let's say Nintendo hypothetically tries to sue a game based on just this claim alone, they would probably lose the court case because it's not enough. This is prior art. There are so many games that have done this already. This is not something, and this is something that's quite obvious, which shouldn't have even been passed on initially. And if they do sue somebody with this will render this particular claim invalid, and they would not be able to use it to fight patent battles from there on. 13 is also quite broad, wherein the second operation must be input is performed, said at least one or many processors. This just talks about like you must have at least one processor. These are very basic claims. Then claim 25 basically speaks of the same logic, but it speaks of an apparatus with a processor. So when it means an apparatus, it just means something like the Nintendo Switch. It can mean any handheld in particular. It can mean mobile phones. So same thing, same old. Then the game processing method, but is for claim 26 here, which explains how it's going to be processed in the game. And also you can even see it from how long, this is a 45-page document. It breaks everything down. But the reason the patents are usually this long is a deterrent. Think of it, you want to start a game and then you have to read through all this and be like, I'm not sure if I'm going to be infringing on this patent or not. Maybe I should just not go on with it. It's usually just a deterrent most of the time. Now, normally the dependent claims are usually what you should be worried about. And what I mean by dependent claims is that one claim is dependent on another claim, and also they are more specific. So we've spoken about the broad claims, which is, for example, claim 1, claim 13, 25, and 26. Those are very broad claims. But if you want to speak on specific claims, you will start reading from claim 2. The storage medium, according to claim 1, wherein the game program further causes the processor to start the automatic controls after the battle by the second mode ends. So basically, after you finish fighting, you move to the second battle. The storage medium, according to claim 2, wherein the game program further causes the processor to, if another enemy character is placed in a determined range, including the position of the sub-character when the battle between the sub-character and the enemy character by the second mode ends, starts a battle between the sub-character and the enemy character by the second mode, right? Same thing. Saying that if another enemy is nearby, another automatic battle starts. That's what this claim basically says. Now, anybody who is designing a product, patents are not only for games, by the way, they're for everything. Whether you're designing a product, starting a business, one thing that you need to know about claims in particular is that they can easily be circumvented. You just need to do it in a different way. For example, you can make it that, let's say that you have a sub-character, but the sub-character is summonable through basically like a crafting method, or you perform some kind of ritual to summon the sub-character. There are many ways you can get around these claims, right? And some of these claims are just too broad that it wouldn't even hold in the court of law. So now, the ultimate question, why did the devs of Palworld pussy out? To be honest, I'd pussy out myself. I'm not gonna lie. It's just, legal battles are just not worth it, guys. Let me not lie. Legal battles can be quite expensive, right? If you've earned so much money, you can actually be ruined trying to defend yourself. Even if you know you're going to win, some battles you just don't pick. Yes, I understand why game devs are worried about it, but on the broad scheme of things, this particular patent is something that shouldn't even have been in place from the very get-go. And Nintendo won't waste this kind of patent unless they know that there's a company that's really copying their IP in a very similar fashion. Let's say, for example, this new Honkai Nexus Anima game, right? It has some elements of some of Nintendo's other patents, like with the flying sub-character. But then again, it's still not a Pokemon game. Yeah, it has pets, but no one will say it's a Pokemon game, right? You can also say the same thing for Azure Premilia, but Azure Premilia, to be honest, it's kind of also borderline quite similar, but you can still argue that it's quite different at the same time. So that will wrap up this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you like, subscribe, please leave a comment. I'd like to discuss this with you, and farewell.